Hello gamers, Power Heal here, and today we're going to talk about soft reserve. So I'm going to be helping you guys in terms of doing soft reserve from a healer perspective, and the template that we're going to use is a Naxxramas 40. And we're going to do that because it's pretty much the most complicated one to soft reserve, and a lot of that is because you're kind of basically not sure if you're going to get the whole instance down. So up until this point, if you've been doing Blackwing Lair, AQ40, Soft Reserve, it's pretty easy to get those down in a night, but there's just so many bosses and so much trash in Naxx, as we talked about in the Why is Naxx Hard video, that these kind of like pug setups they're doing one night a week, it can be difficult for them to clear. If you see that the Soft Reserve is actually going to be 2 nights and they can actually get everybody to just consistently show up on both of those nights, if you can kind of verify that with the logs, then things are a bit different, but a lot of them are going to be 1 night. So keep that in mind and, be cognizant of that when you are doing your soft reserve. And what we basically have here is the run that I was a part of in Blackwing Lair and AQ. They are doing Naxxramas right now. So I just kind of hopped into their soft reserve. I didn't reserve anything, obviously. I didn't want to mess them up, but just using it as a reference, I'm sure they won't mind. And we're basically just going to insert ourselves in here, not actually into the sheet, but just, and we are going to think about, like, if we were coming into this run based on what other people have reserved, what would we actually reserve in the one? What would be the strategy? And I was thinking originally that I would do this kind of live, but when I first logged into the sheet, there wasn't really that much in there, and that's a little bit valuable to go over, but also there was just like almost nothing in there, so it was going to be a little bit difficult to do that. So I figured we would just wait until it gets filled out, and then I'll kind of talk about what you can do at the start when there's not many reserves in at the end of the video. So we'll kind of handle things like that. So yeah, we'll basically kind of get into it, and the first thing, as you can see here, is the logs. So what you want to do is you want to find the logs for the guild that you are, or the just the run in general, if it's not associated with the guild. So ask people in the run, in the Discord that's associated with. There'll likely be a logs channel anyway, but there might not be. So just try and get logs and just see what bosses they get down. And not only see what bosses they get down, but see if they had like a bunch of wipes to bosses. See how quickly they kill the bosses, right? This is a pretty clean run, honestly. So Vesuvius, 2 minutes. Noth, less than a minute. Like less than a minute on Nubricon. Like these are all pretty good clear times, like really respectable. And we're not really seeing a ton of wipes. We see a 4 Horseman wipe, right? So we can kind of, gather that this is a pretty clean run. These guys, they don't have, so the leadership has a lot of experience, but there are definitely people in this run that have not done Naxx before, so there's going to be a little bit of progression. This is going to be a lot of the runs that you're going to bump into on Anniversary, so this is something to keep in mind. And it looks like their progression is basically around the 4 Horsemen stage right now, so they had a pull. It's a pretty decent pull, actually, like a minute 50 into the fight. So what that basically tells me, it's not like they wiped right on the pull or anything like that. They kind of had the pull going and wiped a little bit in the middle part. So this is something that could definitely go down tonight. If I were to basically make a prediction on any bosses to add, and this is going to be something that you're going to have to factor in, right? Because there's a bit of an advantage to making a prediction that you're going to kill something, right? Because if you haven't killed something already, people are going to be perhaps a little bit more reluctant to reserve items off of that boss. However, if you are really confident you're going to be able to get it down, then reserving an item off that boss can be a huge advantage if other people have not reserved it yet. So in this run, it actually seems like some of the people are pretty confident that 4 Horsemen is going to fall, because I actually see some soft reserves on even Saffron items. So yeah, people think that 4 Horsemen is going to go down and Saf's going to go down. I conservatively, if I was coming to this run and saw the logs, I would probably talk to the players a little bit, ask how the 4 Horsemen attempts went, and if it seemed like they were pretty decent, then I would consider, reserving things on 4 Horsemen, but I probably wouldn't reserve things on Saffron, only because I figure it's probably not going to be like a one-shot on the 4 Horsemen. There's already a lot of bosses to get through, there's a lot of trash, and even if you wipe 2 or 3 times on 4 Horsemen and you kill it, then getting to Saffron, you're probably not going to one-shot Saffron. You might do like another pseudo world buff attempt where you kind of go back to org and come back. That's going to take time. And then if you don't kill it on that attempt, then, it's a little bit of a problem. So there's just a lot of chances still for you to kind of not kill 4 horsemen here. Or sorry, not kill Saffron. So I wouldn't reserve Saff on this run, but I definitely consider reserving the 4 horsemen. So yeah, that's basically how I would say to deal with the logs. Oh, and also like you really want to be looking, I know I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but you want to be looking at how clean things are, right? Because even if they can kill all these bosses, let's say they even killed 4 horsemen last week, right? But the run was really sloppy. Like there's a bunch of wipes on some of these. Like there's like 2 wipes to Vesuvius, 2 wipes to Patchwork, 3 wipes to Horsemen, something like that. If you have like a very sloppy run like that, then again, the Pinnacle bosses are going to be in jeopardy, especially if you're only doing one night, right? Because it's just very, very time consuming to recover from a wipe in this version of the game. And people forget that because they tend not to wipe that often, honestly, in most classic WoW content. But Nax is the place that you're going to wipe. So definitely try and factor that into your head when you are looking at loot from kind of like the last couple bosses. Even if your guild can kill a bunch of the early bosses, if they're doing it sluggishly, something to look out for, right? So that's basically the first thing you want to do is look at the logs. Now, I basically have the software sheet pulled up here, and there's kind of 2 main ways that I will kind of go through things. So you see that if we scroll all the way down, we have to the items tab here. It's actually kind of lists everything out for us in terms of who reserved what. This is obviously incredibly helpful. And then if I need to search something specific, I can just go to this tab and come over here and then search it in the search bar. Like if I want to search a player's name, if I want to search a spec, if I want to search an item, I can do it that way as well, right? So let's start on this sheet though. Let's kind of talk about the things that I was looking into reserving, right? So I made a little notepad. So I talked about in the loot video the hammer and the trinket from Saffron. So the hammer from KT and the trinket from Saffron. Now, these seem like they're going to be, off of the table today, right? Because we don't even have 4 horsemen down. I think there's a decent chance these guys will get 4 horsemen down tonight, but again, I'm not super confident in Saffron just because it's the hardest fight in the instance. They haven't pulled it before. There's people in there that, haven't done it before. And yeah, I'd be surprised if it goes down tonight. So I probably wouldn't use reserves on KT or even Saf, but I would potentially think of maybe reserving like the chest from 4 horsemen. So just something to keep in mind as we kind of go through this list. And, I also talked about, I think the tier chest and the tier helmet are both quite good. The hammer from the Spider Wing is decent because, again, we're not going to have access to the KT hammer. And then there's the Twilight Staff, I believe, from Thaddeus, or one of the bosses in that wing. The 2-handed healing staff, that's a slight upgrade over the Augur Staff from AQ40. And then there's things like the Priest Ring and Band of Unanswered Prayers. So those are all kind of things we're going to be looking at, and we'll just, kind of hop in here and see what people have reserved. So right away, the first item I see here is Band of Unanswered Prayers, and we have, how many people? We have 7 people on this, looks like. Yeah. So that's an instant no for me. Just never reserving this when there's 7 people on it. Your odds of winning it are bad, and it's not really that great of an item. Especially if you have, any other item, any other decent rings, basically. Like if you have a Caught Band, if you have double Caught Band, if you have Caught Band and the Pure Elementium Band, if you have the ring from Huhuran and one of those other rings, if you have the ring from Huhuran even, and the AQ40 Reputation Ring, if you have the AQ40 Reputation Ring and Pure Elementium Band, like it's just not enough of an upgrade. And you have to keep in mind, especially on Horde side, which we are in this raid, the priest ring that you'll eventually have access to from KT, that is going to be, only contested by 2 or 3 people, right? So there's no way I'm fighting the shamans over this ring. I think it's a big mistake to soft reserve the band here. The band here. So that's the first thing. I just wanted to make sure, that was the tanking cloak. So let's kind of move on. We're also going to be kind of pointing out things that, maybe some people are reserving that I wouldn't. So this Touch of Frost thing, I would not bother to reserve this. I get that he's the only guy on it, but I just wouldn't really bother because you just don't need it at all. He probably has the neck from AQ20, or if he doesn't, it's very easy to get. It's very easy to get the neck from ZG. Well, actually a little bit, not quite as easy, but you can definitely get the one from AQ20 pretty easily, so I would not worry about this. And then let's kind of keep going. Okay, so the Widow's Embrace. This is something, again, we have 7 people on this item, or sorry, 6. 6 people on this item. It's really, really difficult to get this, obviously, with this many people on it. So I probably would not opt for this unless I, just had a really terrible hammer. And even then, I would be, a little bit sussed out of trying to roll against 6 people for it. Now, the shamans are a little bit interesting because the shamans a lot of times like to maintain their 5 out of 5, so they're not going to be as interested all the time in getting their tier, which means that it can, leave some, they have more rolls on the table, right? So seeing shaman kind of toss their hat in the ring for something like Band of Unanswered Prayers and the Widow's Embrace, it's not quite as surprising because they don't have as many other things to acquire, but as a priest, you really want some of the tier pieces, right? So reserving an item like this, I wouldn't, even if I had even if I was on Benediction, right? At this point in the game, it's probably very easy to get like an Augur Staff, which is sort of close. So I wouldn't really bother. If there's like a lower number of people on this, then I would consider it. But given there's 6, probably not. So coming down to the gloves here, so this is like the first piece of tier. Now remember, you're competing with mages as well as warlocks for this as a priest. And then it's pretty much just going to be like the druid and the priest that are going to be kind of going after some of these pieces because for the paladin, the shaman set is like not as great. I would say the paladin actually is really good. What am I saying? I had the AQ 2.5 set in mind. Priest, paladin, and druid. The shaman set is not quite as good, but if you don't have 5 out of 5, then some of the pieces can be worth using, especially mixing them up with the 3-piece tier 2. You just want to be sure that, like the priest, you maintain that 3-piece tier 2. It's pretty much druid, priest, and shaman all want to maintain 3-piece tier 2. So, a couple notes on the tier there, but you see there's only one mage here, so I would probably consider putting an SR in the gloves. It depends on what other people have in other items, but it's definitely something we consider. Nobody is kind of going for this, but I wouldn't really want to go for it either. So that's something to keep in mind. It's kind of going all the way down. So Noth's Frigid Heart. This item is decent. It's just that it's not, in my opinion, strong enough. Like I actually think this is weaker for Shaman, arguably, than the one from AQ, right? Because the Spirit gets no use on Shaman, and the Intellect is kind of nice, and on some of these shorter fights will beat the MP5, but it's very equivalent. Right, so I wouldn't really bother reserving this. This is something that is just, not going to be important either, the totem, so don't have to worry about that. The Libram of Light here is actually, quite good. If you don't have a Libram, because you didn't do Skolo or something like that, then this is insane. It's actually might be one of the single best upgrades you could get, but you're probably going to have the Skolo Librum. So in that case, not quite as big of an upgrade, but still kind of decent, you know, so interesting option to consider there on Paladin. Obviously, it's difficult because we don't have any Paladins in the raid, but if there's no Paladins on this, I definitely consider reserving it. Okay. The necklace here, again, I wouldn't reserve this because I think, again, it's sort of tempting, right? Because there's nobody else on it. So it's just like, okay, I'll put my name on there and I'll get it automatically, but it's just not really a better item than the AQ20 neck, unfortunately. It just kind of loses out by 4 MP5. The healing value is very similar. So, yeah, just not really a fan there. The legs we're not into, right? So we don't really care about the legs that much as priest. I'm going to be doing this mainly from the priest perspective, but we'll try and cover some things. This ring, again, just not really that great, right? So just a little bit tough there. If I was like a, you know, as a Paladin, I probably wouldn't take these either, honestly, because depending on what other legs I had, right? Especially you can actually get like a really solid green pair of legs with a lot of healing that kind of do a lot of work for you on Paladin. So I may not take these on Paladin unless there was basically nobody else on them. So just a couple things to keep in mind there. I think there might be the weakest slot for Druid as well. I'm not entirely sure on that though. So basically coming down here, this is an interesting idol. I think I prefer the other one, the one that makes the cast time go down. And it's kind of something as a Druid you're going to get anyway, so wouldn't get baited into doing this. The Wand of Whispering Dead here. So again, this is something that if I'm farming my own runes, then I definitely put a soft reserve on this. So I don't think people are foolish for soft reserving this. It's just really a matter of, are you doing that or not, right? So it's going to be kind of up to you to decide. I wouldn't really compete against somebody for it, I don't think. Maybe like one other person. If I was, you know, like I said, farming all my runes exclusively on the priests. But otherwise, yeah, I wouldn't worry too much. So Glacial Headdress. Yeah, this is, unless like, I'm very shocked, you know, this person is acquiring all the Frost Resist pieces, because unless they're kind of going for like a PvP scenario where they're fighting Frost Mages or something, then yeah, I think these are kind of wasted SRs. So I definitely wouldn't be SRing any of the FR gear. The thing you have to keep in mind is, like, if nobody SRs that, it's basically just going to get given to somebody anyway, right? So, yeah, you don't really want to be the person that's kind of wasting your SRs on it. So coming down to the Robe here. So there's 2 people on the Robe. This is kind of making me maybe not want to SR it, especially considering the fact that you know, we don't have Horsemen down technically, so that's something that I will consider, but I'll probably come back to later. And yeah, so this is a good for Paladin from what I remember. I think it's pretty good for Druid as well, so something to keep in mind there. This item is funny. Maul of the Redeemed Crusader, but yeah, so I probably wouldn't take... This is something you could take on Paladin if you like needed a weapon or something, because it's going to be probably free. But obviously it doesn't have any combat effectiveness for you in the raid, so... but, you know, I wouldn't be below using an SR in something like this if my Paladin really needed a weapon. Kind of like the same situation with the Priest. If I was farming runes on that Paladin, you know, having a really strong weapon is nice, so... And this is going to be uncontested. So, yeah. Warmth and Forgiveness. See, like, this is sort of tempting because there's nobody on this. But again, we haven't downed the 4 Horsemen, and it's not really that good, so I would have to kind of, you know, just look at some other things first. Cloak of Suturing. I mentioned this in this video that I didn't think this was that good. If it was like completely uncontested, and I didn't have a Cloak of Clarity or something, I may consider going for a Cloak of Suturing, but there's 4 players on it, so yeah, I'm just not super into trying to grab that right now. Just kind of go down a little bit more. This is interesting. A shaman's actually on the End of Dreams here. If you have something, honestly, that's like a, if you have the ZG hammer, or maybe you actually only have the Molten Core hammer or something like that, getting something like this, not terrible if you don't mind putting the enchant on it. You have to shell out for the enchant, because otherwise it's kind of like, this is basically like the ZG hammer. If your ZG hammer has an enchant and this doesn't. But yeah, not terrible when you're going to be the only person on it. Just, again, I would probably have, the rank 14 weapon on Shaman anyway. So now, Death's Bargain. This is actually kind of interesting. I like this, that somebody's actually went for this. I think it's really great to have a shield like this, and there's only, there's nobody on it, so somebody's just like, I'll reserve that. And I think it's pretty good, especially if you don't have like the Oro shield or something like that, or the one from Veil from Blacking Lair. Then this is a really solid shield. This guy is not getting contested on it really by anything, so I'm all for it. Let's look at the helm here. Okay, so there's a lot of people on the helm. Okay, so the helm, another one that's going to be tough to compete on. Okay, so we'll move on to the Paladin helm is also decent from what I remember. So kind of come down a little bit more. Spire of Twilight. Okay, so this is interesting. So I would not reserve this. I probably wouldn't reserve it anyway because I have an Augur Staff. If I had a Benediction, I would definitely consider reserving this. The problem is I would probably not if there was a Shaman doing 2 times on it, or anybody doing X2 on it, right? So a little bit sketched out there. Eye of the Dead. Okay, so this is the one where I don't think we're killing Sapphiron. So unfortunately, as much as I want to reserve that, I don't think I would. Same with the Eyes of Sapphiron here, right? So just kind of keep going. And I think belt, boots. Okay, so looks like nobody is on boots. I would have absolutely reserved these because even though I have Pure Thought, I would reserve these for sure. Oh, sorry, this is the bindings. I reserve the boots. Wait a minute. No, somebody might be on the boots. Are they? Desecrated boots. Okay, here we go, yeah. So I would definitely reserve these because there's nobody on them. And they're definitely better than Boots of Pure Thought, in my opinion. So if you have Boots of Pure Thought, they're better. They're noticeably better. But most people aren't going to have Boots of Pure Thought. So unless you need the boot slot in order to use your set piece or your 3-piece, then I would absolutely do something like this. So this would be my first reserve in the run for sure, I would say. Then Desecrated Shoulder Pads. Okay, the 2 locks are on that, so it's a little bit tough. Okay, none of this stuff is healer related. I think that's everything. I think that's everything. Okay, so looking at that on like the kind of once over, it's difficult because since you haven't gotten to the Pinnacle bosses, right? The Saf Trinket's not unlocked. The KT weapon's not unlocked. You may even have some of the priests trying to roll on the KT wand, depending on what the loot priority looks about that, right? The offhand from Sapphiron, the shoulder enchant from Sapphiron. I wouldn't recommend those things, but they are things that could potentially happen, right? So without those bosses unlocked, it does kind of, squish the loot a little bit and makes it more difficult to kind of get items uncontested. But that being said, yeah, I would definitely get the boots because those are purely uncontested. I think I would put a soft reserve on the gloves because there's only one other person on the gloves. And then I think that I may Let's look at the chest. How many people are on the chest? I would probably put one on the robe as well, just because there's only 2 people on this. So I'm competing with nobody for the boots, right? So I can only have to use 1 SR there. The gloves, I'm competing with 1 other person. And the gloves are good, but they're not like amazing. So I'll put 1 on those. And then the chest, I'll probably put 2 SRs on because... 1 more SR on. Just to kind of spread out the SRs. So there's like definitely a bit of strategy in terms of keeping them all on 1 item, right? Increasing your chance on that item or spreading them out. Typically, it's a bit more worth it, in my opinion, to spread them out, unless you just really need 1 item above everything else, right? And the reason why spreading them out tends to work really well is because the more items you hit on, then the easier you can kind of reconstrain everything, and it's kind of harder to go the other direction, right? Because even if I were to try and, compete on something like this, right, with 3 soft reserves, the odds that I'm going to actually win it, still not really that great, okay, because there's already 7 people on it. So it's most likely, and then it has to drop as well. It might not even drop. So if it doesn't drop, it's gone. If somebody else wins the roll, it's gone, right? And I'm using all of my opportunities to secure loot for myself on kind of 1 item where I'm rolling with a lot of people. So I typically like to spread out my soft reserves amongst, bosses or, loot pieces that don't have a lot of other people on them, so that we're kind of hitting on 3 areas, right? We're diversifying, so if 1 item doesn't drop, the other ones still have a chance to drop. And then we're rolling on against less people for it, right? And then the more of those items we can get, then the more we can just focus on tunneling on the stronger items later on, as we kind of, build from week to week to week. Hopefully you guys kind of have the same people coming to these runs over and over again. So yeah, I think that I would definitely just... I don't think I would bother to do Widow's Embrace, honestly. Yeah, so I think I would just grab the... what was I going to say? That? Yeah, 1 on the chest, 1 on the gloves, and 1 on the boots for a run like this. And again, I don't really care about the necklace because it's not an upgrade. I don't care about this ring. It's not big enough of an upgrade, and I'll probably eventually get the other ring anyway. And so you can just use like either the AQ40 ring and the Blackwing Layer ring, and then the Priest ring from KT, right? So you don't really need this. And yeah, I think that's pretty much what I would do. The last thing I want to talk about is if you get to the sheet early, so what you can kind of do, right? So what I like to do early is if there's like an item that I really want, especially if it's a contested item, is I'll 3x it right off the start. And the idea is you are trying to signal that you want this item really bad, and that you're trying to dissuade other people from going on to it, because they're going to be like, oh my god, there's 1 person on this item at the start, and there was already 3 reserves on it, right? Like, screw that, I'm just going to go reserve another item. So you're trying to do something like that. Obviously, a lot of it involves checking the sheet over and over again to kind of update your status on items, but I've definitely done that before. You have to be very active in terms of moving your soft reserve. You have to be a little bit careful because typically there'll be like a line where once you get really about to pull a boss, they'll import the sheet to Gargle. And at that point, nothing you do in this sheet matters, right? It's just kind of a way to secure. So if somebody forgets to lock the sheet, then nobody can mess with the sheet after the fact. That's why they typically do the import to Gargle. But they might import to Gargle while the sheet is unlocked, and they might forget to lock the sheet even, because it doesn't matter if it's imported, which means that they could potentially import the sheet even before it seems like the soft reserving period is over. So you want to be careful about that, and make sure your raid leader communicates about when they are actually essentially locking the sheet, importing it to Gargle, and that's the final one. And that's the point you need to get your final adjustments in by. But yeah, I'm usually pretty active, and I'll try and like signal something, like I really want this, and then change the reserve later, potentially. If if it's still not going well. Like if I 3x this and there's still a lot of people on it, I'll probably just move my reserve, right? So you can do stuff like that. Do a lot of micromanaging, but at the end of the day, you're basically just trying to find the stuff that's like decent for you that you have, and then while spreading your priority out across multiple things, and then also, just so that you can kind of get those items and you can knock things off your list. That way you can hard focus the rest of the list on the items that you are going to really want down the road. And I think, like, for me, once I got a couple of pieces of tier, it's kind of interesting how this is going, right? Because a lot of the Pinnacle items are kind of blocked off right now, which means that the only things we can focus on are these kind of pseudo upgrades. So that's why I would really try to focus on getting as many of them as possible. And I wouldn't bother on things like Widow's Embrace and things of that nature. Like, I would just go right for, the tier, and I would try and get as much of the tier as possible in a run like this. And then once we actually do get to SAF, we do get to KT, at that point I can just use all my SRs on the Saffron Trinket. I can use them all on the Hammer from KT, and if I don't hit, then who cares, right? Because we're playing with house money at that point. We already got a bunch of loot, from the earlier weeks. So that's pretty much how I'd handle this. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I will try and answer as best as possible. It's very difficult to kind of do a video like this because at the end of the day, it is just dynamic, right? And it's going to also just really depend on your run. People value different things differently in different runs. It's pretty much as simple as that. And for healers, I feel like healers tend to be in the spot where a lot of them tend to be newer, where they don't really have a good idea about what is good for their character, in the same way that like a warrior would. Like most people, if you're playing DPS warrior, you're well acquainted with warrior Nax Abyss, right? They've been salivating over these items for forever. So as a priest or a healer, some people may be familiar with the really strong items like the hammer and things of that nature, but they won't be familiar with the rest of them. So the soft reserve sheet can kind of look a little bit wonky, and you just kind of have to play around it and try and find the weaknesses in your guild, and put your soft reserves in there. And then once you kind of establish, you kind of get those items, then you tighten your search even further and try and really go after the big items. And like I said, if you're in this progression type of situation, you really want to get as many of the little items out of your the way as possible early, so that you can just completely tunnel on the insane items once those kind of open up to you. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you learned something from this. Like I said, if you have any questions, comments, anything like that, drop them down below. Like, comment, subscribe if this helped, and I will talk to you guys next time. See ya.